She thought a few carefully chosen words would be enough to erase a black man from first class. Words laced with prejudice, spoken with the confidence of someone who believed the system would take her side. The flight attendants leaned in, the passengers turned to watch, and for a moment, it seemed her plan might work. But then, with steady composure, he reached into his pocket and revealed something that froze the entire cabin: an FBI badge. And in that instant, everything changed. For him, flying wasn't a luxury, it was part of the job. Years of service had taken him across cities and borders, yet each trip carried the same simple routine. Pack the essentials, grab a quick meal, and settle into the seat he had earned through both hard work and sacrifice. On this day, he boarded quietly, dressed neatly, and slipped into first class like any other professional on their way to the next assignment. To most passengers, he looked like just another traveler. To him, it was simply another flight, another chance to rest before duty called again. But normalcy rarely survives in the face of prejudice. As he unfolded a book from his bag and prepared for takeoff, he could feel it, the sharp, lingering stare of someone who didn't see a man, but a target. It wasn't the first time, and he doubted it would be the last. Still, he had no idea just how far one passenger was willing to go. What began as an ordinary trip was about to become a confrontation that would test patience, dignity, and the hidden power of truth. The first minutes of the flight passed uneventfully. Passengers shuffled bags into overhead bins, seatbelts clicked, and the low hum of the engines filled the cabin. He sat quietly, focused on his book, unaware that across the aisle, a woman's eyes had never left him. Her glances grew sharper, her whispers more deliberate, until finally, she pressed the call button. A flight attendant leaned over, expecting a simple request for water or a blanket. Instead, the woman leaned in close, her voice laced with disdain. She insisted that the man in first class didn't belong there. She claimed she felt uncomfortable, that something about him seemed suspicious, dangerous even. The words dripped with arrogance, as if she expected the crew to obey without question. At first, the attendant hesitated. They glanced toward him calm, composed, minding his own business. But the woman's tone carried weight, the kind that suggested trouble if ignored. Soon, another attendant appeared. Then came the hushed whispers, the sideways glances, the subtle signals that spread through the cabin like wildfire. A once routine flight had shifted, and all eyes seemed to converge on him. He noticed it, the silence, the unease. Pages of his book blurred as the stares pressed down on him. He could almost hear the unspoken question hovering in the air. What is he doing here? He adjusted his posture, refusing to shrink, but the whispers only grew louder. Then came the request, polite but pointed. The attendant asked if he could step aside for a quick check. The implication was clear. He wasn't welcome, not in first class. Not even as a passenger without suspicion. The woman smirked, satisfied, as though her words had already won. But prejudice rarely stops with a single demand. The whispers spread into murmurs, the murmurs into murmurs of agreement. A few passengers nodded along, emboldened by her accusation. Others looked away, unwilling to interfere. He was now isolated, surrounded by doubt he had never invited. For a moment, he considered the cost of silence. Should he comply, step aside, and let her claim victory? Or should he resist, knowing resistance could mean escalation? Each option carried its own danger, and the cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his choice. And that was when the tension reached its peak. The woman leaned forward once more, her voice louder now, calling for security as though she had uncovered some hidden threat. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Passengers shifted uneasily, unsure of what to believe. The trap was set, the pressure mounting, and every second dragged him closer to a breaking point. What none of them expected was that beneath his calm exterior lay a truth powerful enough to shatter the lies. The cabin had grown unbearably tense. Every pair of eyes seemed to weigh down on him, some filled with suspicion, others with pity, but most with silent judgment. The woman's voice cut through the air once more, louder this time, dripping with false conviction. He doesn't belong here. You need to remove him before something happens. Her words weren't just an accusation, they were a sentence. The flight attendant stepped closer, hesitation written all over their face. Behind them, a uniformed officer who had boarded for routine security checks now lingered, assessing the situation. The trap was tightening, and he knew it. In that moment, the years of unspoken prejudice, the countless times he had been questioned, doubted, or reduced to a stereotype, all seemed to converge into this single instant. The woman smirked, convinced she had won, and convinced her words carried more power than his presence, more authority than his dignity. The officer's hand hovered near his belt, a silent reminder of how quickly things could spiral. The cabin was silent, hearts racing, breaths caught, as if the entire plane teetered on the edge of chaos. And then, with a calmness that seemed to slice through the storm, he reached into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out a worn leather badge holder and flipped it open. The gleam of gold caught the light, an FBI badge. Gasps rippled through the cabin. The smirk vanished from the woman's face, replaced by shock, then horror. The officer's posture shifted instantly, from suspicion to respect. The flight attendants froze, mouths slightly open, realizing the truth they had been blind to. For the first time since the ordeal began, silence worked in his favor. The power she thought she held crumbled in an instant. And as the weight of her false accusations collapsed around her, the balance of the entire cabin shifted. The air inside the cabin felt different now. The same passengers who had looked at him with suspicion a moment earlier couldn't meet his gaze. The officer, once ready to act on nothing more than prejudice, stepped back in silence. And the woman, the one who believed her voice carried the power to erase him, sank into her seat, her confidence shattered. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to humiliate her in return. The badge spoke for itself, but more than that, so did his calm dignity. With one quiet action, he had dismantled the lie she built, exposing not just her ignorance but the fragile foundation of the assumptions so many people carry. The flight continued, but it wasn't the same. For him, it was another reminder that no matter his accomplishments, no matter his rank or the weight of the badge he carried, prejudice could still follow him anywhere. For the passengers who witnessed it, it was a lesson written in silence, proof of how quickly judgment can turn and how wrong it so often is. And for us, watching from the outside, it's a mirror. Because this wasn't just one man's story. It's the story of countless others who don't have a badge to shield them, whose truth is doubted, whose dignity is stolen with a word, a look, or a false accusation. The question isn't whether this will happen again. The question is, how long will we allow it to keep happening?